BYU is the sleeping giant. Texas Tech has the best NIL, and Arizona State will win a championship again. Let's talk recruiting and the biggest moneymakers in this league. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Today, we will talk BYU, Texas Tech, Baylor, everybody in the league, how their NIL sits, their transfer portal and high school recruiting, and who has the best shot to win long term. Brian Smith, host of The Portal, Locked On's show covering all things recruiting, will join us to give takes on this conference as I give my opinion on who the next man up or next team up is. Let's go.
Drake C. Toll, buddy. Thank you for joining the show. You cover one of the most successful podcasts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And I think a lot of it is the fact that the fans, where y'all from, you want to win. And I think there's going to be more people throw money at it like Texas Tech. I talked to Chris Bevel today, and I think there's going to be one of them. So right off the bat, I'm just going to give you the opportunity here, Drake. Is there enough money going into these programs? Again, I use Tech as an example. Baylor's another one. Oak State, they've had some big numbers. Do you think one of them could take that step forward and compete at a very high level?
Well, I promise the eyes watering and the sunburn are not indicative of the Big 12 being that far behind the SEC and the Big 10 that I've just wasting away. I think you've hit the nail on the head with the oil money because there's such a base for the Big 12 in Texas. And Brett Yormark knows that. They're moving it's the little things. The Big 12 Media Days will move from Las Vegas to Frisco and the Star. There are no casinos at the Star. Choctaw, it's 3 hours away from there. So you got a little bit of a drive if you want to do your blackjack. There is a focus now on the Lone Star State, and there should be, because Baylor and TCU, because their private school status, can afford during the revenue-sharing era of college football to dole more money out to their athletes. They'll go full revenue share. Texas Tech is a large enough university that they will, with their NIL and revenue sharing, give a whole lot of cash out to their athletes as well. And the better the football team is there, the more their fans are engaged. For Houston, we know they've got a very big hill to climb. But the best part of being a Houston Cougar right now, Willie Fritz wins, and recruiting there, not too hard. If you want to convince a kid, hey, stay home, have your family watch you on ESPN or Fox or TNT and be 30 minutes away from the stadium, that's a sell for a good portion of recruits in that area, especially in the transfer portal, when you can say, hey, you spent 2 good years as a starting cornerback at Western Kentucky. Come back to the Houston area, help us be a contender. So I do believe a lot of this starts with the Lone Star State. A lot of it starts, too, with Texas Tech and the way they've handled NIL. If you're going to catch the Big 10 and the SEC, the best way to do that, as we know, is recruiting. And recruiting with intent to develop. Why do I say that? Texas A&M. They win the recruiting battle every year. They're one of the best schools in the SEC at bringing in elite high school talent, at paying big money, at using that OIL money we talk a whole lot about to bring in those kids. And then the second they get them there, they haven't developed them into championship level program, So for a TCU, a Texas Tech, what you do now is you leverage the money you have because your private status or your oil money, your big donors, and you pump every dollar that you can into football. Not basketball anymore, not baseball, not softball, where Texas Tech has gone. And I'm a proponent. My sister is a softball player, committed and signed to Baylor University. I love college. I watched Baylor win a national championship when I was a student there, live in person in basketball. But if you want to survive today in college athletics, if you want to keep the lights on at the soccer stadium, at the baseball stadium, football is your investment. If Brett Yormark wants to catch the SEC, Texas is where it starts. And then from there, when those schools have built up, BYU is a supplement. Utah is a supplement. The recruiting base in Orlando is a supplement. And even deep pockets and big donors in a state like West Virginia, where there are no competing schools. Though everybody who grew up in West Virginia wants to donate to effectively one university, and that's West Virginia. It puts the Big 12 in a decent spot. As far as catching the major conferences go, that's going to take the transfer portal, not high school recruiting, but they're at least closing the gap in some areas.
Your point there at the end is a great segue to my second question. Let's say it's Texas Tech this year that wins the league, and Lord only knows Big 12 is so hard to predict. Yeah. But they win a playoff game. They become an important factor. ESPN and CBS and Fox, I mean, they got to do stories on them. They're doing interviews with coaches, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that would help catapult the league, not only in just getting more exposure, but giving that exposure to recruits to say, hey, why not go over here? Because so many of the kids will visit a Big 12 school, but they rarely sign that's a top 50 kid. It's just they don't finalize the deal. Do you think that would help?
No. And it's weird that I would say that, right? The easy answer is yes here. But what we have to do, and the Big 12 is getting very creative to be able to try to compete with the SEC and Big 10. What we have to do is understand we need to be building juggernauts, not one-offs. Great example, Clemson. 15 years ago, no one cared about Clemson.
You're right.
No one cared. They were a Houston or a Cincinnati. You know, okay, like, yeah, they're good a couple of years. And they had that national championship a while ago, but I don't want to play there. And then they consistently won on a national scale for 10 years. When they did that, they built a brand. Colorado has built a brand, not necessarily off consistent winning, but off Deion Sanders. BYU or Arizona State or Kansas State or Iowa State. The schools that are winning right now at the top of the Big 12 need to keep winning. I made the analogy in season that if you're going to beat the best team in the Big 12, you're Kansas, right, who was 5-7 but beat 3 of the top teams. Don't do that. That's only hurting everybody else. You're killing off Santa Claus, the Tim Allen movie, and then you have to become Santa Claus. We need somebody that can be the big man who gives out the presents. So on a year-to-year basis, we need a Santa Claus. We need a Clemson. Texas Tech, 10 years of consistent winning, 4 playoff appearances, 1 national championship, even appearance can become a Clemson caliber program. They have it in them. So would Texas Tech going to the playoff help? Sure, but it needs to be annually. If it's Arizona State again next year, that only helps you. If they go to the national semifinal and win a couple games in the playoff, that now establishes, hey, here's a Clemson type. Here's a Phoenix area team that's got a possibility to develop into what Dabo Swinney did at that university. That's what we need. Not one-off, oh, well, their geography is good and their NIL is good. No. We just need 10-year consistent winning programs.
I think that's a really good point, the consistency factor. I mean, Arizona State was picked dead last by some people, if I remember correctly.
The entire media, 16th, yeah.
I mean, by the way, they won the league. It just shows you how crazy the league is. But you need some juggernauts, and the SEC was built on that. I told a lot of my friends, I said, it's different at the top of the league. You go shake a defensive tackle's hand from Georgia or Bama, it's different than the other. It's just, I mean, the very upper, and that's exactly what the Big 12 needs. So I wholeheartedly agree.
Well, and Brian, the only thing I want to add to an addendum there is you shake their hand, it's different. You know, I've been in the press conferences with Kirby Smart. I was there covering Baylor and Georgia a few years ago in the Sugar Bowl. The first thing I noticed, the size difference. But in some of these games, I mean, in a portion of these games, like Vanderbilt, Alabama, it's the same thing. Vanderbilt looks like a Big 12 team, you know, and you see Alabama, but it doesn't always equate to wins for the SEC schools. So that's where if you're a Big 12 coach, you have to develop, you know, if you just go by size, Arizona State had no business being on the field with Texas. No 100%. Business. You shake hands with every guy on both those rosters. From there, it's trusting your Big 12 teams will win games, develop players who weren't blue chip, weren't 4 and 5 star, weren't these, you know, top 50 players in the country to be able to compete on that level. So as important as recruiting is, winning, as you know, is doubly important in this sport.
100%. Kids won't go where they're not going to get a chance to play in the limelight. And I don't blame them. By any means. Yeah. All right. Here's an interesting one, talking about a brand, very, very unique brand. How does a school like BYU utilize NIL?
How much time you got? What's left in the show here? What do we?
I mean, it's up to you how you want to answer that, but it is fascinating.
That is, and I kind of mentioned this to you off air. It's such a fascinating thing to me because BYU, when they first got to the Big 12 and prior to being in the conference, had always signed 2-star kids from Logan, Utah, from Orem, Utah, from down the street from Park City, and turn them into competitive football players. We remember the season, I think 2020, where BYU still played 11 or 12 games, was top 15 in the country that season. And there have been very good Cougar squads, but that was based off 2 stars, 3 stars, development. Now they're investing. And it was Tom Holmoe, who actually recently retired or will retire as their athletic director, who started the initiative on the basketball floor at first, hiring Kevin Young, one of the top assistants in the NBA, saying, you know what? Here's millions of dollars to sign the number 1 basketball player in the country. And let's do the same thing in football. In the transfer portal, let's dole out the money necessary to fill the holes that we have and create a Big 12 championship caliber squad for next season. So BYU went from being this kind of fiscally conservative, let's win the old-fashioned way, develop our players, and do things as they've always been done. They're the leading university, they're the flagship university of one of the largest, fastest-growing faiths in the world, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that creates some constraints in how you build your rosters and coaching staffs and administration. But constraints foster creativity, and that's what BYU has done in NIL. They have called the owner of the Utah Hockey Club and said, hey, we know the pockets are deep. What do you got for us? And it seems as though every phone call they're making, even to like a Danny Ainge, who could be their next athletic director, has paid off for them. And that money is no longer going toward, all right, we'll put some toward this new building or that new building, this new facility. But they're catching up with the rest of college football and saying, hey, we don't need a new Whirlpool. We need that $1 million to go to a player who will be on our team next season. BYU has gone from old school, old fashioned to let's do things the 2025 version of college football, the 2025 way, and pay our players. Huge for the Cougars. And again, considering they're a flagship of an entire faith, that is a perfect storm to create the bell cow of the Big 12.
I agree. I think they would be a very great brand. Yeah. Because people would be fascinated to learn about it if they started winning. So I 100% agree. Yeah. When we come back, we're going to continue on this discussion point with Drake. There's a lot to get to here on this edition of the Big 12 on the Portal.
Today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. You probably heard me say this before because the company gave me the opportunity to do the TurboTax commercial across the entire network. Taxes were really complex and complicated. Now, taxes are easy and smooth with TurboTax. This message from TurboTax says that they are as easy as uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation, an expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on progress, and you get the most money back guarantee. All while you go about your day, no stressing or worrying or waiting. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now. TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. That is TurboTax.
Baylor, a school that you might know a thing or two about, Drake. That is the next. This is a steal question for you. It's like, you should just already know this. Dave Aranda has had a unique run there. They got hot last year. Do you think that their NIL, I mean, they got some cash there, as you well know. Do you think their NIL is going to let them, especially coming off pretty good end of last year, take another step? And if so, why?
Baylor has every chance to do that, but where they're going to adjust away from NIL will be even more key, and that's toward revenue sharing. So I bring this up on every show I do, and the reason I do is because it is the perfect example of where college football is going. Jamie Pollard at Iowa State, the athletic director, said, hey, we're going to pause our upgrades to our basketball arena and our new wrestling facility. Why? Revenue sharing. I can't spend $22 million a year on my football players, mostly football players, right now without going broke. For Baylor University, they can. They will dive completely into revenue sharing even before NIL, to ensure that $22 million is there every single year. I've talked to coaches on staff there who have assured me, hey, even if it doesn't go to the women's tennis team, that money's going to be there because we've committed so much. Our donors have committed so much in the last decade to making sure that we are elite or the top level in college athletics. We can't give up now. We're too far in. That $22 million has to be there. So the NIL's there. The we pay players shirts were a big thing. You know, Baylor was very boisterous about how they were able to gain so much NIL traction over the course of last offseason. They're going similar to a BYU away from this kind of fiscally conservative environment into the era of NIL. And what's going to be different about the Bears, and TCU's in this category as well, is revenue sharing will be the top of their concerns, the top of their list as private schools moving forward. Those private schools have a lot of money trickling through them. They always like to play the victim, like, oh, well, this is tiny private school. Hey, Drayton McClain, who owned the Astros, built your football stadium. The Fudge family, who've got billions of dollars, they just built your new indoor football practice facility. The Hurd, Mark Hurd, was the former CEO, the late Mark Hurd, former CEO of Oracle. He's got a lot of money. And guess what? His widow is now dating Bill Gates. I don't think money is going to be an issue for the Baylor. Like, I myself have walked into a Baylor Cornell basketball game at their basketball facility, the Hurd Center, and seen Bill Gates courtside watching the Bears. That doesn't hurt in the NIL era of college football. You're going to be okay when the names like that are alums or donors for your university. Baylor is in a unique and very positive spot. Now the question becomes less of where is the money and who's managing it. Can Dave Aranda be a general manager? Does there need to be a general manager? Or is that guy who's not great with people? Like he can be a brick wall sometimes. If he walks in your living room and then Lane Kiffin or Eli Drinkwitz or Deion Sanders follows him up, I can tell you who I'm signing with. That's my question. Can Dave Aranda facilitate that money, or will somebody be able to handle it for him?
That's a great question. We'll have to see, because I think he's a really good football coach.
Correct. Yeah. Great DC and great, like, if he just had to be the head football coach, we're dandy. But this 2025 asks a lot more out of you. Yeah,
we'll see what they do with the GM spot. And speaking of that, and switching to Texas Tech, they keep their guy. They keep him from Notre Dame. Their NIL is crazy. They're a big oil school. Coach McGuire spent 14 years at Cedar Hill High School, just on the edge of that. Like, it's a great story. Are they at least a leading contender to be that team that takes a step forward, in part due to NIL?
They should be. They no doubt should be. And what Joey McGuire has built there as far as momentum goes is huge. And what he's built as far as wins have gone. This past season that lost to Washington State, you started to question, okay, how good are they? They pick it up. Baron Morton and company find a way to start winning toward the end of the year. And you think, okay, Texas Tech is in a good spot. And for Joey, man, not only is he a motivator, he's a master salesman. And when you're a salesman like that, people jump on the wagon. They start to feed into his energy, even without monumental wins, Big 12 championships, a shot at the game or a chance in the game or playing in the game. He has brought millions of dollars through the Matador Club. That's the name of their NIL collective. And moreover, their fan base has decided that, hey, in this revenue sharing era of college football, if Kirby Hocutt, our athletic director, cannot pay that $22 million every year, we, the fans, will keep the team in-house. We will supplement it ourselves via NIL. So for a school like Texas Tech, who hasn't been exactly clear that $22 million will be easy for them to come up with, the fans are saying, fine, if you can't, we'll back the money up, and whatever you don't have, NIL will cover because we want to win. We've gotten a taste of 9 wins, which for Texas Tech, who sits typically in that like 5 to 8 range, 9, once you start smelling that a couple times under McGuire, you're going, okay, shoot, this could work out okay. And with Mahomes also in fold, with Texas Tech buying ads at Arrowhead Stadium and posting those during the AFC Championship, they want you to know Texas Tech could be that next Clemson, could be that next national brand who wins at a very high level. And I believe that with the Matador Club and their commitment to it, they'll do that.
Well, that kind of leads to this. Maybe Tech's the answer to this as well. Which Big 12 school is attracting enough talent and using the resources in an intelligent way to kind of like, they've got a roster better than people know, and they're headed in the right direction. Whichever one you want to go with, brother.
Again, I'm going to go back to BYU here. They are the sleeping giant of the Big 12. We've mentioned, as you said, the deep oil money that runs through Texas, the big donors that run through Baylor or Texas Tech, and the recruiting base of Orlando. There are so many things you could name about these Big 12 schools. Phoenix area being in Tempe with Arizona State. I mean, if I'm a kid and my first visit is going to even Columbus, Ohio. I've been to both in the last year. Columbus, Ohio versus Scottsdale, Arizona, I can tell you where I'm going to go. And there are advantages in each of those categories, but no one has it like BYU. Reason being, the LDS faith. The LDS faith, if you're a major donor to any university, to any athletics program, if you like sports whatsoever, and you fit that bill, there's only one school. There's only one school your money's going toward. It's not BYU, Idaho. It's not BYU Satellite in Hawaii. It's BYU in Provo, Utah. They pack that stadium out every single night. Home field advantage, there. NIL is now there. Commitment to signing 4 and 5 stars is now there. Commitment to hunting the transfer portal, bingo. They have evolved into a modern athletics department once they joined the Big 12. And again, in Texas, there are 12 D1 schools to compete with, maybe like 12, 17, between somewhere in that number. And you go out and you could say, Utah, yeah, they have Utah, Salt Lake City's 40 minutes away from BYU. No, that's not the flagship university of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you were to say, for everyone who is Catholic or Southern Baptist, here's your university. This is the only one, and Notre Dame kind of has this. Give your money to them if you're a sports fan. That's what BYU is. Again, for one of the most relevant, growing faiths in the country. And there's one thing that people really buy into, it's religion, and that's at play here. And it's not a negative if you're Brett Yormark. It's something you absolutely embrace, absolutely put your arms around, because it's making BYU into a powerhouse. And it's great. I've been to Provo multiple times, seen multiple games there. It's my favorite place to watch games as well, because the crowd is stone cold sober and as rowdy as it gets. And I just cannot explain the vibe that you get when you walk in and just see the commitment they have to making sure BYU athletics is great. We talk sleeping giant, next man up, it's BYU.
I can definitely see that. When we come back, we're going to talk about last year's Big 12 champion, what's ahead for them, Arizona State. Drake, Arizona State is a unique program. Picked dead last year in the league, wins the league. I think they got hosed in the whole play at mid. Yeah. I know you've probably rehashed that 375
million,
times.
yeah.
But they've got a quarterback that's an NFL player in the future. They've got people all around. I mean, that's a big city in Phoenix, growing city. Give me your pitch on why Arizona State over the next 5 years is the most dominant Big 12 program.
Well, if that's the statement, and I have to qualify that, in a court of law, they say, hey, Arizona State dominates the next 5 years, I can absolutely back it up. I was there 2 weeks ago at the Waste Management Golf Tournament, and there's so many of these, Sun Devil shirts on. That's the first thing I bring up. People will probably be ticked off that, the first thing it brings up, weather, dog. February, January in Scottsdale and Tempe and Phoenix.
Yeah.
It is spectacular. And again, you're going to have guys who visit Ann Arbor, Michigan. You'll have guys that go on a visit. And even I love Tallahassee, Florida. But then when you find out, wait a second, I'm in Florida and I'm that far from the beach. There's such an appeal and a draw to being comfortable. And there's a reason spring training is in states like Florida or in Phoenix. So that's the number one thing you have over a whole lot of schools there, and even some Big 12 comparisons, Ames, Iowa, or Morgantown. They're great college towns, but they don't offer you the atmosphere that a Tempe does. And past that, NIL commitment and commitment to filling the gaps in recruiting. My favorite schools are not the ones that bring in 30 guys in the transfer portal. In fact, those are my least favorite. My favorite are the ones that bring in 8, 12, 13 that are the right guys. And the schools that lose 8, 12, 13. Positive attrition. The guys who did not fit are now gone. The guys that we want to win with are now here. Arizona State has figured that out. And then past that, Kenny Dillingham is an ultimate developer of transfer portal talent. Hey, come from the FCS ranks. Cam Scatterbo, Sacramento State. Come from D2. I will, in one off season, in one full season, mold you to become what we need to win. Come from the high school ranks, be 18. Know that Xavier Gilroy, you'll be redshirted. Gilroy comes in and replaces Jordan Tyson, their best wide receiver in the Big 12 championship game, and stepped up huge to dominate and blow out that game. He will take, from high school to transfer portal, players who have already been developed possibly earlier in college football and turn them into new human beings. He is arguably the best football coach in the Big 12, taking 16 to 1, the X's, the O's, the development. He kept his OC and his DC. Kenny Dillingham is dangerous. We know the university has the city behind it. We know they have the NIL that's building. We know the recruits and the horses are already in the stable. They won a lot last year, went toe-to-toe with Texas, and that last domino to fall is Kenny Dillingham being a damn good football coach. That's dangerous.
I 100% agree, and I think it's good for college football. They've been a sleeping giant for a very, very long time. Here's my next question on the opposite end of that. We've talked a lot about certain schools probably having a bit of an advantage as it relates to, let's say, not just NIL, but like the commitment to football, like at BYU. Like it matters there.
Yeah.
It matters at Iowa State and Kansas State too, but they don't have oil money. And it's a different kind of game. How do those schools, I mean, they're going to be good, I think, this next year, both of them, ironically. But now that NIL is really starting to get, how do they survive long-term, not just middle of the pack, but compete for the Big 12 title?
Coaching and development. And that seems like a cop-out answer, but I'm going to go back to Texas A&M. For A&M, for the last 10 years, they've been in the top 5, top 10 recruiting rankings, and they haven't had coaching and development. You look at a school, there are a couple, like at Texas Tech is not always, very seldom actually in the top 25 in recruiting, but Joey McGuire has a way. Like, hey, we had the 31st best recruiting class in the country this year. We're going to find a way to win with it. TCU a couple of years ago, Sonny Dykes. Like that was specifically coaching. How do we take the guys we have and win with them? How do we take this 2-star left tackle from North High School in Des Moines, Iowa, and win with that guy as our starter? Somehow Matt Campbell finds a way. He's one of the best football coaches. And there's a reason NFL teams and other major schools in the Big Ten call after him every offseason because they don't know. He's a magician. No one else has ever won at Iowa State. How is he doing it? Kansas State was the original Kansas. They still barely have an above 500 all-time record because prior to Bill Snyder, they couldn't win a game. They couldn't buy a win in Manhattan. And then Snyder comes in and proves, hey, good old-fashioned coaching will win. Chris Kleiman, North Dakota State, doing the same thing. Hey, we know at North Dakota State we're not getting the same guys as Alabama or Ohio State. We're just going to have to do things differently to bring guys to a school like North Dakota State and win. That translates to Kansas State. It translates to Manhattan. That's how you do it. You do it with savvy coaching, not with recruiting, because they haven't yet. Neither of those schools have had top 30, top 25, top 20 recruiting classes consistently. They've used positive attrition, development, and good coaching. So I'm going to go on the portal and say that those schools can basically keep recruiting at the level they are because that's what's working for them. They've got locker room buy-in guys. Stay off TikTok. Stay off asking me for $1 million in NIL. Avery Johnson, in-state kid, come to our school, work hard, play day one, win. That's what we ask of you. We're not USC. We're not UCLA. No flair, nothing. We'll have a damn good offensive line. You go do your job wherever you're placed, and that's how they're going to win. They will not have to have top 30 recruiting classes to compete.
I'm going to get you out of here on this one, Drake, just for fun. Again, for those who don't remember, Arizona State was picked dead last in the league last year and won it. That's a little unusual even for the Big 12, but still. Give me 3 schools to look at as potential favorites this next year in the Big 12.
Well, I'll give you the favorites pretty quickly, and then I want to get to something that I actually feel a bit more passionate about, and those are schools that sucked last year. That'll be a bit better this year. I do think BYU, Arizona State, and Iowa State, Kansas State are kind of interchangeable, can all be counted on to be at the top of the league. I'm going to put those schools up there as ones that I really do value this year in the Big 12. But look at a Houston that could shock a lot of people and win 8 games. Look at a West Virginia that could surprise a lot of people. Again, we talk about positive attrition. They did enough in the transfer portal there late to build a bit around Rich Rodriguez. They could go 4-8. They could also go 8-4, which would surprise a ton of people. Look at UCF. Orlando's a great place to be. I think that could be a couple years. They could be a couple years away, but I wouldn't be shocked if we see them win 8 games next year. And then for an analyst like me who picked Kansas in the Big 12 championship last year, I'm going to ride the Jayhawks again. Don't count Lance Leipold out. That is a guy who has proven he can win at a place that is unwinnable. I think he'll do it again next year. Those are 4 instant contenders and 4 other teams that could really surprise a lot of folks.
Drake, why don't you tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend?
Yeah, at Drake C. Toll on Twitter, at LO Big 12 on that same platform, and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.
Man, I appreciate it. You can find the Portal Podcast on the same platforms, Spotify, Apple, and of course on YouTube. Thank you very much. Like, subscribe. We will see you again soon on The Portal.